I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. The fate of Christians in Egypt remains up in the air as President Hosni Mubarak steps down. Plus, it's the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, but a food pantry named after her struggles to feed people. And with Valentine's Day around the corner, we'll go into the deep to talk about marriage.
Marriage, sacramentally, we consider a communion of persons. That goes deeper than hugs and kisses. It goes deeper than any physical relationship.
Well, good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. He is out and we are in. Those were the chants of protesters in Cairo's Tahrir Square tonight after learning President Hosni Mubarak officially stepped down. Just 1 week after what anti-government protesters called the Day of Departure, Mubarak departed the capital city and handed over power of the government to the military. Demonstrators who had been calling for the president's ouster then took to the streets once again, this time in celebration rather than protests. The crowd set off fireworks and flares, chanting messages of victory. But cities like Cairo and Alexandria were not the only places where such celebration was happening. Here in New York City, celebration also broke out on the street in Astoria, Queens.
I want all the people all over the world to know how Egyptians are very happy. We are very happy. Alhamdulillah. Thanks God. Thanks God. We prayed a lot. We prayed a lot, and I was looking for someone to share me. Now I can't believe that you are all sharing me. I'm Egyptian.
Well, in Washington, President Obama said the Egyptian people have made clear that only genuine democracy will carry the day.
The people of Egypt have spoken. Their voices have been heard, and Egypt will never be the same. But this is not the end of Egypt's transition. It's a beginning.
Well, for more on the situation in Egypt now, we turn to CNN's Samantha Hayes.
A revolutionary day in Egypt as thousands of demonstrators chanted "Egypt is free" after hearing the news of President Hosni Mubarak's resignation.
We've had our chains broken. It's very hard to understand what freedom means until you lose it and you try to find it.
The country is now in the hands of military officials, according to Vice President Omar Suleiman, who delivered the news.
President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak has decided to step down as president of Egypt and has assigned the higher council of the armed forces to run the affairs of the country.
Vice President Joe Biden, speaking from Louisville, Kentucky, emphasized the significance of the day's events.
This is a pivotal moment in history. It's a pivotal moment in not only Mideast history, but in history.
The uprising began January 25th, sparked by events in Tunisia and organized initially on social media websites. Anti-government protesters gathered daily for demonstrations in the streets of Cairo and other Egyptian cities. Wael Ghonim, the Egyptian activist and Google executive, hailed the success of the movement.
We are just, a generation that needs to eat and sleep. Tons of thousands on the 25th decided to start a search journey for Egypt, and then they convinced hundreds of thousands, and then they convinced millions of people. We were all looking for Egypt, and thank God that we found her today. I just want to say welcome back, Egypt.
And we got that report from CNN's Samantha Hayes in Washington. But what about the situation for Egypt's Coptic Christian community? With all of the uncertainty brought about by regime change, some are concerned their freedoms will be diminished. And for more on that part of the story, I spoke earlier today with Michael Lasavita. He's with the Catholic Near East Welfare Association. Here's some of what he had to say.
It's a wait-and-see period, but certainly for the moment people are excited. On Sunday, they commemorated it as a day of martyrs, and there was a Muslim service there, religious observance, I should say, and then there was a Coptic Orthodox Mass. What was interesting is that members of Christian and Muslim observers surrounded the liturgy and protected the worshipers. They were concerned about some of the street clashes that had happened earlier. These images symbolically offer some form of hope that all Egyptians, regardless of their religious background, are going to work together for the better of that country.
And as a side note, today is also the 32nd anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We'll stay with Currents as we continue to follow all of the latest developments in Egypt. But just ahead, will Congress put an end to taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood? Some on Capitol Hill have proposed doing so. That story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in a bit, what is marriage? I'll talk with Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio to get some answers. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, from Washington, there is a new effort underway in the House of Representatives to defund Planned Parenthood. Republican Mike Pence of Indiana says he'll introduce an amendment to cut all federal funding from that organization. Republican Congressman Cliff Stearns of Florida says he will call Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius to testify on the matter as well. Now, Planned Parenthood has been under fire since the beginning of the month. That's when the pro-life group Live Action began releasing undercover videos that showed Planned Parenthood employees advising men, posing as pimps, on how to get abortions for underage prostitutes. A Planned Parenthood clinic director in New Jersey who was in one of those videos was fired as a result. Elsewhere on Capitol Hill, members of Congress and a coalition of Christian groups calling for a crackdown on illegal pornography. They say existing laws which ban most forms of pornography distribution, including through the internet and through satellite and cable TV, are not being enforced. They're urging Americans to contact their senators and congressmen to get them to sign on to the effort. Well, meanwhile, the only avowed atheist in Congress says he wants a day for Darwin. The Oakland Tribune reporting that California Congressman Pete Stark has offered a resolution to proclaim Saturday, Charles Darwin's birthday, as Darwin Day. Well, now the resolution praises Darwin's theory of evolution and the evidence he used to back it up. A representative from the Family Research Council called that resolution a waste of taxpayers' time. Well, turning now to the Vatican, where newly released data shows the number of priests around the world rose over the last 10 years. Africa saw the greatest growth with an increase of close to 40%. Asia came in second with an increase of more than 30%. Well, the data from North America, though, not as promising, where the number of priests fell 14%. Meanwhile, priests of the Ukrainian Catholic Church are without a leader after the resignation of Cardinal Lubomir Husar. The 78-year-old cardinal could have remained in office for his entire life, but he submitted his resignation because he is almost blind. Bishops in the Ukrainian Catholic Church must meet within 2 months to elect a successor, who must then be approved by Pope Benedict. The Ukrainian Catholic Church is the largest Eastern church in full communion with Rome. And while today is the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, Rome Reports has the story of the apparitions in the small French town and what many people say are the miraculous healings that have followed.
In 1858, Our Lady appeared 18 times to Bernadette Soubirous in Lourdes, a small town in the French Pyrenees. There, the Virgin Mary recalled the importance of prayer, the rosary, penance, and humility. She also recalled God's mercy towards sinners and the importance of taking good care of the sick. The apparitions took place in the cave of Massabielle, where she soon began to build a shrine.
It's a place where Our Lady chose to appear and spoke to the shepherds, small, poor, simple people. She left a message for the entire world, and the popes have understood this.
The apparitions were declared authentic on the 18th of January in 1862, 4 years after their occurrence. Lourdes is now one of the key pilgrimage sites around the world. Each year, 6 million pilgrims visit the shrine. Many consider the water there miraculous because it's healed the sick. Doctors at the shrine have recognized officially 67 miraculous healings, and more than 8,000 other cases are registered. Miraculous cures of problems as serious as paralysis or heart disease have been observed and are still without scientific explanation. The Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes is celebrated on the day of the first apparition on February 11th. 2 popes have visited the shrine, John Paul II and Benedict XVI. The first traveled there twice, once in 1983 and again in 2004, less than a year before his death. Benedict XVI traveled to Lourdes in September 2008 for the 150th anniversary of the apparitions of Our Lady to the young Bernadette.
Stay tuned, there's more currents coming up. Just ahead, the hungry flock to a local food pantry, but supplies are running low.
We don't know from one week to another whether or not we're going to be able to open or not.
Welcome back. Well, before the break, we learned about Our Lady of Lourdes, whose feast day is today. But now we're going to visit a food pantry in Queens Village that bears her name. And the people flocking there are not looking for miracles, they just need food for their families. We caught up with a mother who visits that pantry regularly, as she's one of the more than 1.4 million New Yorkers who cannot afford enough food in these tough times. What we also discovered, though, is that the pantry itself is also in need.
Being hungry is not a joke. Lick your lips, baby. Okay. Let me see. I come every week to the pantry. I come weekly. Every Wednesday I'm here. Every Wednesday.
The food shortage really hinders our helping people, because when people are out of jobs, they don't have money to buy food to donate to the parish, to our outreach, to our food pantry. And we can't give people the amount of food that we'd like to.
How you doing, sir?
All right, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
We've had an increase in the last 2 years of between 2 to 5 people each week, 2 to 5 families. So that could be, 10 people, it could be 15 people.
This for you. It's so helpful, because sometimes you can get and it's just not enough. And with the extra ends that they give you, it makes it enough so you could live and everybody be happy with bellies full. I'm healthy, my children are healthy, and everybody goes through a little hard times. I'm going through a little hard time now. I had to swallow my pride a lot of times, but sometimes you just have to and go with it.
We give people 3 meals for 3 days, as opposed to just one bag of groceries.
If I went to the pantry in Brooklyn, they're gonna give me 1 can of milk, 1 can of vegetables. Here you get your family size. My family is 7. I need a push cart when I leave here.
We are subsidized by the parish. We don't get money from the diocese. We get money donations. Other pantries in our area have had to close because people weren't donating. They couldn't afford to keep it open. We don't know from one week to another whether or not we're going to be able to open or not. These shelves used to be filled with reserved food, but now we don't have any food at all on reserve. Whatever donations we get in, we put right on the shelf. We give people half now of what we used to give them because of we want to help everybody. Okay, you want dry soup or canned soup?
Can.
Okay.
I would rather be in a position where I didn't have to ask for help, but as it is, I still need help, and this is where it's at.
So what kind of cereal do you like? Honey Nut cereal? What have we heard? If everyone lit 1 candle?
Say bye, Erica. Take care. See you next week, dear.
If everyone brought in 1 can or 1 non-perishable item, we would be able to make it through the next couple of months.
This is milk. If they shut down this service, I really don't even know, because I'm so used to coming here, I really depend on it. I couldn't say what I would do. I really don't know. I really don't.
Well, the need is certainly great. Give to your local food pantry. Stay tuned. There's more Currents ahead. When we return, what is marriage? We go into the deep to get some answers.
Marriage has two basic things. First, it's the mutual support of the couples, and secondly, it's the bringing of life into the world.
Well, finally tonight, it is almost here, Valentine's Day. Come Monday, you know, there'll be lots of flowers, candy, and cards. And, you know, maybe some of you will be popping the big question, huh? But before you take that big step, you probably want to be sure you know what marriage is all about. I actually had a chance to talk about that with Bishop DiMarzio in this week's Into the Deep. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks so much for being here once again. We really appreciate it. You know, there's a famous scene in Sesame Street where Grover asks a young boy, you know, what is marriage? And the young boy replies that it's hugs and kisses. Well, that's part of it, obviously, but that's not all of it. How does the Catholic Church define marriage? What is it exactly?
Marriage, sacramentally, we consider a communion of persons. That goes deeper than hugs and kisses. It goes deeper than any physical relationship. It's a spiritual relationship between persons. And that's really critical to understand what marriage really is. The family is a communion of persons, and it begins with the communion that exists between husband and wife. They are the ministers of the sacrament of matrimony. The priest is the witness. It is they who confer the sacrament on one another with their consent and willingness to be one with one another.
Well, of course, Pope Benedict recently made a statement that, you know, not everyone has an absolute right to marriage within the Catholic Church, and he talked a lot about pre-Cana and about how there needs to be, you know, more counseling taking place before marriage and things like that. Do you think there's maybe some misunderstanding out there about what exactly gives the Church its authority to define marriage?
Probably there is. Marriage is a natural right. At the same time, when we look at it as a sacramental right, it's different. That's what the Pope was referring to. There's no absolute right to a sacramental marriage. You have the people who believe in order to contract the sacramental marriage, and that's part of the problem today, that we have a generation which has lost a lot of the belief and understanding what marriage is, its permanency, its indissolubility, that it can't be dissolved. It's a lifetime commitment. So many people don't understand that, don't agree with that, so therefore they can't have a sacramental marriage, although they would like the trappings of one. To really commit to one is something very different.
And you think that might be one of the reasons why, you know, marriage as an institution that's been around for so long is under a microscope now? I mean, a lot of people are looking at it and saying, well, it's kind of falling apart. Why is that, you think?
Well, it's part of our society and a lack of ability for people to make lifelong commitments. Everything is of a temporary nature. And then we have the other issues of a society that is sexually active, that tempts people all the time in different circumstances. So fidelity becomes another problem, and that's what marriage is. It's fidelity to one person for a lifetime. And our society's has belittles that by all of the entertainment that we see and by the fact of the lowering of the moral standards. So that's where the difficulty is.
Well, recently in Illinois, also Iowa, this has come up, Washington, D.C., not all that long ago. Same-sex marriage has been something that's been in the headlines, not only there, but other places as well. Even here in New York, you know, last year, there was kind of a big battle in Albany about that. Explain for us, if you will, kind of the Church's view on why that is not acceptable.
Well, because marriage is a union between a man and a woman, and other unions should not be called marriage because they're not marriage. Marriage has two basic things. First, it's the mutual support of the couples, and secondly, it's the bringing of life into the world. And although people claim this can be done by other artificial means, naturally it can't be done. So those two things are how marriage has been defined for centuries, certainly by the Church. Those are the indissoluble elements that need to be there. And it cannot happen in a same-sex marriage. So that's the difference. We see kind of an intolerance, though, regarding our understanding of marriage. We have to change our understanding because other people want to see it differently. Well, why can't we keep our understanding And their understanding is not something that is marriage. They want to adopt something which is not what it is. So that's the difficulty we run into.
Well, and Valentine's Day, of course, coming up here really quickly. Besides the chocolates and the cards and things like that, what are some ways that people can take some time to sort of, not only on that day, but on every day, make their marriages better?
Well, I think the time is the element, is critical. The marriage encounter movement is something very important in the church. Has a little exercise called 10-10. That the couple takes 10 minutes apiece each day to talk about their feelings, how things are, the feelings, not just the facts, but the feelings, because they're really important. That 10-10 exercise keeps people together. If people would do that, they would have a lot of happier marriage, and I think would understand better what love is in marriage.
Time and communication.
Right.
All right. Well, Bishop DiMarzio, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
All about love and marriage. Well, that is it for tonight's edition of Currents. Now, coming up on Monday, it will be Valentine's Day, and just 1 week after the Super Bowl, we'll visit a football wedding reception. We'll also find out more about that new iPhone confession app from one of the priests who helped develop it. Until then, though, be sure to visit us online. We're over at currentsny.net. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter. Just search for Currents there. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night and a great weekend.